Canada now wants to move beyond credible intelligence to investigations over the June killing of Sikh separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar on Canadian soil.
It follows a week of tit-for-tat actions with India after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused New Delhi of involvement in the killing. The U.S. has acknowledged it provided some of the intelligence against India, sharing it through the Five Eyes Alliance.
The development comes amid a report saying Indian intelligence agencies had warned its diplomats and citizens in Canada of violent protests planned for today by various groups. But Canadian media, citing one group, said the protests will be peaceful, adding it plans to shut down Indian consulate offices in several Canadian cities.
All right, for more insight on the brewing spat between India and Canada, let's speak now with John Packer. He's an associate professor of law with the University of Ottawa. Professor Packer, after a week of diplomatic fallout from India accusations, Canada is now emphasizing criminal investigation. How confident are you that these probes will progress smoothly and ultimately lead to the accountability of those responsible?
Well, I think it's not something that one would have high confidence in. First of all, the persons who apparently carried out the murder seemed to escape very easily, despite the fact that this was a public, open-air murder with many people around. So it's a little bit surprising that it's already been difficult to trace, capture, and so forth, those who are at least alleged to have committed the crime. So I'm not that confident.
Now, Prime Minister Trudeau said he raised the killing directly with Mr. Modi at the G20 meetings. He then made the allegations publicly in Parliament. Could this have been handled differently?
Oh, I think there's no doubt it could have been, and many people would say it should have been handled quite differently. The impetus apparently for the Prime Minister to have to disclose in Parliament, which is quite spectacular and unprecedented action, was that apparently it was going to be announced in the newspapers imminently, and he felt he had to get out in front of that and not be accused of withholding information. So I think it's a kind of local Canadian story that explains why it came out that way. And that there had been efforts, of course. The matter had been raised directly with Prime Minister Modi and so forth. So I think it was the disquiet on the part of the government of Canada that nothing was forthcoming and that it was going to kind of explode in the public sphere.
Professor, so what are the risks of bilateral tensions flaring up further in the weeks and months ahead? And what should citizens in both countries be mindful of going forward in terms of safety and security?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the situation is not only very poor. Obviously, we know already that immediately between the two states at a diplomatic level, both countries asked for the withdrawal of a diplomatic representative. I think it's said to be head of intelligence on each side. So that was kind of a tit for tat and a kind of probably a necessary step in diplomatic terms. What will come from after that is hard to tell, but that's obviously not a good relationship and not a good direction of things. Many other things steps have already been taken to suspend, for example, visa arrangements, the impact on trade, and so forth. This is an important relationship in many, many respects. And for both countries, it's important, possibly more important for Canada at this point than for India, but it is important for both. There's a large diaspora, Indian diaspora in Canada, not just Sikh, a broader Indian diaspora, $5 billion of annual trade and so forth, which is growing. So I think it will be repaired. It's almost imperative from an interstate perspective and a kind of the long-term relationship perspective to repair it. But in terms of individual Canadians, this is going to be impactful, and it's obviously had a chilling effect on not only the Sikh community, which is well known and has had a radical nationalist element for decades, actually, but I think the idea that a Canadian citizen can be killed, can be murdered, potentially assassinated by a government, a foreign state on Canadian soil in front of a public, watching public, that's absolutely shocking for Canadians.
Yeah, the implications are quite severe, though it is a note to be sort of alleged as investigations continue to be ongoing with that. Tell us a bit about your thoughts about how this will impact India's international reputation then. On one hand, New Delhi is part of the Quad and the G20, seen as mostly Western groups. On the other hand, it also wants to expand its influence in the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where Russia and China dominate.
Well, first of all, we have to underline that this is at the moment an allegation, and it is actively denied on the part of India. And they have taken umbrage, of course, at the kind of precipitous character of the allegation and the accusation and so forth. However, there appears to be pretty strong, high confidence in terms of the intelligence services and within allies and the Five Eyes, as you mentioned yourself. And I'm sure that the Prime Minister of Canada would not have taken the steps he's taken without high confidence on his side. I mean, in his remarks in Parliament, he did not actually say that they carried out an assassination. He said that there was the potential for such links, which gives a little bit of space, for example, perhaps an arm's length or even a deniability on the Indian government side that might have been involved in some kind of Indian agents and so forth. So, that's a small element, but it is only an allegation. What it means more broadly, though, if there is credibility in this, and there appears to be credibility in this, this does add another element of doubt on the character of the Modi government, the increased nationalism, the fomenting of Hindu nationalism in India, and the preparedness to take such extreme measures, including extraterritorially, raises more questions also about India, and that's problematical.
And if the evidence, as you said, emerges supporting Canada's claim and India-Canada dispute escalate, how will Canada's allies navigate their relations with India? Will they be forced to choose sides?
I don't think they'll be forced to choose sides. I think clearly Prime Minister Trudeau was seeking and expecting more forthcoming support than at least has been publicly expressed, because the Indian relationship is extremely important. We just witnessed how Modi was himself received and given a state dinner, for example, in Washington recently. The importance of the Indo-Pacific, really cornerstone of foreign policy for now a number of states. You mentioned the emerging alliances as such, the counterweight to China, and so forth. So I think this has to be somehow repaired, and probably with time it will be. This is not a unique action in the world, neither on the part of democracies. I mean, India being the largest democracy in the world, but of course the United States of America has been involved in extraterritorial actions, including assassinations, notorious ones historically. And more recently. So I think on the part of major, for example, the United Kingdom and the United States of America, they're obviously not happy this rift has come out into the public. They're probably not happy that this measure this recourse was taken by the Modi government, if it did. But I think it won't stand in the way of the foundational relationships that are being built right now in terms of global security and trade.
All right, Professor Packer, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you very much for your insight this morning. Associate Professor John Packer from the University of Ottawa.